And we're live. Good morning, guys and ladies and gentlemen, to our second book review with Roger Do, my co-host. And today we have special friends joining us. So most of you know Roger by now. He's the founder for Q Search, the the Cambridge Analytica for Asia Pacific. So he knows all the political bigwigs in Asia Pacific. We are also joined today by a good friend back in my NUS days. He was one of the founders for the very successful SOPIM. So nowadays, it has been bought off or invested in by Sendes. Now he has a new venture, which is the Majuven. He's the advisor for Majuven, which is a VC, venture capitalist. And finally, last but not the least, is Anton Dator, formerly a friend from Singapore. He used to work in Singapore. He's now back in the Philippines and he's trying to revive the UP Entrepreneurs Club. Now, without further ado, let's go to our discussion. So here is I'm sharing my what do you call this, mind map. Anton, are you seeing my mind map?
Not yet. Let me just check.
Okay, let me see the share screen again. Maybe I should share this one. Okay. So, can you see my mind map now?
Yep. You need to zoom out a bit. I just see the book itself.
Yeah. So, okay.
Interesting approach on mind map.
Yep. So the reason for that is, I read a lot of books and I tend to forget them. so, so what I do is I create mind maps for them. So like I'm going to share this in the hopes that it will trigger whatever you guys also read about the book. So in a nutshell, this is what's covered by the book. How to change anyone's mind using the mnemonic reduce. So R for reactance, E for endowment, D for distance, U for uncertainty, C, E for corroborating evidence. So also, let me also point out that Julian is joining us in Singapore from his car. He can only do that in Asia Pacific from a few countries, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea. You cannot do that in other countries with crappy internet. So, Roger, jump in anytime guys, Anton, jump in whenever you feel like you have something to say or to add so that our listeners can benefit from your insights.
I first read the book and I was okay. I wasn't that impressed at the very beginning, but as we got into it, I realized this is a critical thing. Not so much the book itself, but we have somehow lost the ability to convince people, either at a governmental level, at a business level, and at a personal level. We need to be able to change behavior. You just can't tell somebody to do something and they do it. We know that doesn't work. I mean, anybody who have children know this doesn't work. There's a lot of thought going into modifying behavior. And when we look at the COVID pandemic response, it seemed like most of the government has lost the ability to convince people to change.
Yeah.
What you do is, okay, do this or be penalized. And that only goes so far. And we need to have a systematic way of implementing change that's more persuasive, more permanent, and more lower cost. We can't fight every change in the world with expensive legislation. And this is something that people have, I think what will lead to the destruction of society is our inability to govern ourselves through changing behavior. Like COVID, AIDS, these two diseases has ravaged the world economy. Yet these two diseases are completely stoppable without medical intervention if we just change the behavior. For AIDS, put on a condom. For COVID, wash your hand, wear a mask, keep distance. These are low-cost behaviors. Yeah, we can't do it. Government can't convince us to do it. We're in trouble.
And let's go back to the book. The author, Jonah Berger, who's also the author for Contagious, cites an example that backs up what you just said, Roger. And I think, Anton, since you just finished reading the book, this is still fresh in your mind. So the author cites the example of in the US. So this example may not resonate with the Asian Pacific audience, but in the US, Tide decided to create what they call the Tide Pods, which is this one. So the idea here is you just open it and throw it into your washing machine, and it's laundry detergent in a very convenient package. Now, what happened was somebody started a Tide Pod eating challenge. It's not supposed to be eaten, but they and so Tide enlisted celebrities to conduct the no, don't eat the Tide Pod. And true enough, like what Roger is saying, you know what the effect was?
It become
Right
worse.
after it became worse. So this is to the point that Roger was sharing a while ago. Yeah. So according to Jonah Berger, and Anton, just jump in if I missed anything. People want to have the sense of control. So when you dictate something, suddenly people are against it. And right now, we're being joined by Mr. Ramon Duremdes from the US. He's a friend of mine's Facebook, and he's into the health and medical stuff. Okay, so what does the author say about agency and control? The absence of persuasion made people think that they are doing what they want. And so he claims that people have anti-persuasion radar. So let me just pull this up so people can be reminded of the graphic. So his suggestion for overcoming what he calls reactance, which is the first R of the reduce, is to allow for agency. So his example here in another talk of his that I just inserted here is, if you encourage people to persuade themselves, you take care of the agency problem. So instead of saying you do X, you say can you do X or Y? You provide a menu of choice. That's his basic argument. And then I'm not. Yes, go ahead.
He's also saying something about having the intrinsic motivation to make that decision.
Yeah.
Once you present the options and then you give them the opportunity to think about what's in it for them, what's in it for them to decide between A and B, then it removes that barrier, removes that roadblock as to which the person will be more likely to accept the change.
This is an interesting point about choice architecture. So when we do biz dev, we do a lot of sales call. We used to ask, "Are you free this week?" And that's a horrible question because
I don't have time.
There's shoot when you say, "Are you free?" It's either yes or no. So we started asking, "Are you available this Thursday or next Tuesday?" Yes or no is no longer part of this choice. And as an entrepreneur, we need to think about a choice architecture and these kind of persuasive in everything we do, because we just need a few more percentage of conversion, a few more percentage of compliance to what we want them to do, because our entire business is about creating new habit.
Right. So interesting point, Roger. Thank you for that. The next one is one way that the author suggests is to highlight a gap. And for this, I'm not sure. Anton, do you still remember the smoking kid campaign in Thailand?
Yeah, so they had the kid come up to the person wherein they're asking for a light for the cigarette, and then the guy who's smoking will tell the kid, "Oh, this is bad for you. Don't do it." Then afterwards, the kid will give them like a paper with a note saying, "You care for my life, but when will you start caring for yours?" So it
And
was very impactful. Instead of telling the smokers to stop smoking, so they
mhm,
had this different way of approaching the issue.
right. And in another example, he cites the killing an old project. Do you still remember this, Anton? So typically in coding work, the developers or coder will be hesitant, right after investing so much time writing millions of lines of code, um, to adopt something new. And so the author suggests that, maybe you ask people to imagine what other companies should do if they are just starting out. And then so obviously they would recommend something else because they would know that their existing system is crappy. And then that's where you highlight the gap. If you're recommending this to other people, why are you not doing this in-house? So basically that's how it went. In the interest of time, saving time, we'll not go through all of the things that he said. He just mentions also we need to be aware of the status quo bias. So people are loath to change. Whatever works for them, that's it. They're sticking their guns to it. Which reminds me, we're in the COVID fight. We're heavily promoting the use of digital contact tracing technologies to make the contact tracing as scalable as possible. But we still find, the common obstacle is, we're fine doing it this way. We see no need to change. They're fine right now because they have only 1 to 0 cases. So they can't imagine the time that the cases start spiking and you're faced with 1,000, 10,000 cases and you only have a team of 10. How can you do contact tracing manually with a team of 10? And so you see a lot of local governments in the Philippines suddenly swamped with so much contact tracing tasks that they simply give up.
Yeah, let me give you an example from my company.
Yeah.
There was a requirement from the government for people to fill out health declaration forms on paper. So you fill it out, then the HR department or the operations team collects it. But after that, when something happens, it takes them a long time to do a tracing. So what we did was to have sort of a QR code
Code
process wherein
system.
people will just input it online and then do the QR code, and then it's faster. My team doesn't need to encode everything because it goes automatically. But again, correct with what you said. If we don't think about it now and do something about it now, what more could happen if we're facing thousands, millions moving forward? These things you cannot
Mm-hmm.
do manually.
Yeah.
But if you think of contact tracing using the phone app, it doesn't have social proof built in because I can't see what's on your phone. One of the interesting ideas: what if working with Globe or any of the telecom where people have to top up their
Smart.
card
Yeah.
every
Uh-huh.
2 months? If you show you have the code, you have the contact app, they give you a cheap ass rubber band, like wristband. So every 2 months, you do one.
Ah,
So you're externalizing your participation. Yet the band has no technology; it's just a social proof item.
yep. So
So
the
that's
other
one way for
thing,
you to connect the internal privacy on your phone with creating a social proof.
I was suggesting to one of the contact tracing apps to have a facility to share the results on their social media profile. So not only it will act as a social proof, it also act as a recruitment tool. Because remember, these contact tracing apps are only effective if 60% or more of the population is using them. Right?
Yeah, I think
So,
Singapore is trying to put the armband as a tracing device,
yeah.
actually a social proof and as a technical solution. I think that's actually very clever, independent of the privacy issue. But having an external social proof is a huge, very powerful thing.
Right. So I hope our readers and listeners now are enjoying learning from all the points that you guys are sharing. Now let's go to the second point of the author, which is the E under reduce for endowment. So let me consult my notes. So what is the endowment effect? So it's the how do you explain this easier, Anton?
It's something that you perceive you already have, and you're not willing to give it away or do something different because it disrupts your status quo.
Right. So it's more akin to the loss aversion effect.
Loss aversion, yes.
Loss aversion. So like there was this case, Pacific Gas and Electric Company over here. They're not our sponsors. We're just citing them because they were listed in the book. They offered power plants like, you can get it cheap, but it's not reliable. Or you can get it more expensive, but it's going to be reliable. So naturally, a lot of their consumers migrated to the more reliable plan, except for a small minority that still opted for the cheap but unreliable. And when they were asked, they said, we're used to it anyway. So we might as well get the lower plan. And there was also the story about this happens to us a lot. There's a new version of the phone. Like me, I'm now on a Huawei P30, but there's a Huawei P40. There was this guy that already bought the next version, but took him forever to migrate over to the new phone.
Yeah.
I'm sure this happens a lot because, there's switching costs. You have to enter, migrate all your contacts and all your apps. So not as easy. So there's what they call a switching cost.
Like what they say, if it ain't broke,
don't fix it.
No, but sometimes you gotta break things, right? So
right. So also he says that to get people to change, you have to demonstrate that the benefits are at least two times as good as the disadvantage. So what else for our switching cost? Here. I've made this post in my blog because I'm so frustrated by the inaction of the local health officers of not switching over to using digital contact tracing techniques. And Jonah Berger, the author, was suggesting you highlight the cost of inaction because sometimes people are just comparing the cost between alternatives and does not include the cost of doing nothing. Like what Roger said in the comments, right? Roger, what was it that you said? Something about do you remember what you posted in the comments page of my post before, Roger, on this point?
I say so many senseless things.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things you want to think about what's endowment is, let's take an American COVID. Why are so many anti-vaxxer against the mask? What in the conceptual endowment are they holding on to that they won't switch? So you have to think about not just what they're endowed with and just with the cost, the belief system. That's a huge roadblock to change. Like I was saying, like the anti-government people who refuse to wear a mask. What if we printed a mask with a QR code said this mask will screw up facial recognition? So you're basically disendowing them. One part of their conceptual world frame was another endowment. Like by wearing this mask, you will pollute the facial recognition algorithm.
So you're changing the frame of what's the term? Yeah, the frame of reference.
Yeah.
So instead of being a subservient citizen, you are now a subversive yourself.
Yeah, like this mask has a SQL injection attack code built into the core.
So if the government scans you,
You will
the
screw up
government's
the data.
database immediately
corrupt.
gets deleted. So
Not well,
like
yeah.
Roger, in the Philippines, the anti-terror bill has just been passed. So
Yeah.
maybe we should be careful with what we say,
Maybe
or
you
else
should
we
report,
will not be able to go to the Philippines again.
maybe you should report every Chinese tourist as a communist in the Philippines. Because
hang on. We're surfing into dangerous territory. Let's take the discussion back. And so the author says here that, like for Philippine culture, I see this a lot. Ma- uh, they have a very resilient nature. They tend to be able to put up with small inconveniences. Right? So this is what the author was also saying. Really terrible things get replaced, but mediocre things stick around. Horrible performance generates immediate action, but average performance generates complacency. So I think this is a...
But I think that's true. But here's the thing. We are really good at dealing with these sudden crises. Like a company have a sudden crisis, you're really good at dealing with it. But if you have a cultural performance, a cultural issue, we are horrible at slow disasters.
Right. And so the other example to highlight this point is the shattered knee. If you only have a trick knee, you will never go, you are less likely to go to the hospital and get it treated. But if it's a shattered knee, you will go to the hospital and get it treated. So that's, so the author is suggesting that to generate immediate action, you have to highlight the cost of such inaction. And then here's the famous thing, Roger, the burn the ships strategy to counter the endowment effect. So in the book, Anton, just jump in if I missed anything. He cites the example of Hernan Cortez when they wanted to attack or conquer the Aztec. Apparently, the governor from some Caribbean country who was in charge of this expedition already gave the orders for Hernan Cortez to pull back. And so half of the crew were planning a mutiny. So what did he do? He just burned the ships. No more talk of mutiny. But I remember, Julian, maybe you can help me with this. In Chinese history, there was also a Chinese general. I think this was popularized in the movie. Huh?
No. I think you're talking about Xiang Yu. So
Xiang Yu,
yeah, not that's not Chibi. So Xiang Yu was a very ancient general from this state of Chu. Chu is now present-day Henan Anxi. And he was so this one is called the contention of the Chu Han, right? So this is before after the Qing dynasty, right before the establishment of the Han dynasty. So he was fighting a northern war. Suddenly I can't remember which warlord already. I think it's the Qi War. So what happened was he had much lesser army, right? And so he was supposed to be fighting a much bigger army up north. So he crossed the Yellow River and basically to cut off all retreat and to force his men to fight for their lives. He burned the ships and broke the pots. So it became a Chinese phrase called 破釜沉舟. So basically, it's that means you break the pots and you sink your ships, right? It's not necessarily burn your ships, but he shattered all the ships. But he told all his soldiers that, look, we there's no way back. You only have 3 days. We only have 3 days worth of rations. So if you want, we have to raid the enemy camp. So I think that's kind of like a way to actually show. And he won the army in the end, but he lost the war. I have to. I have to. I have to. I have to say that in very, very strong terms, because that action actually cost him quite a fair bit of people.
And so moving on,
Yep.
the author also talks about catalyzing change isn't really about making people comfortable with the new things, but helping people let go of the old ones. So in this example, he used the Brexit campaign. So this is the Brexit campaign bus. We send the EU 350 million pounds a week. Let's fund our NHS system. Vote leave. And as we all know, the Brexit campaigners won. So that takes care of the E part. Let's go to the D, chapter 3. This is an incredibly short, concise book. So I'm putting up images to jog the memory of my co-panelists. By the way, Mr. Durendes, if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in. So the basic idea of distance is sometimes you cannot ask for the whole 9 yards or the whole football field. You cannot ask people to change their belief system from one point of the football field all the way to the other football field. Sometimes you need to go in smaller increments. So basically, that's the idea of distance. Anton, Roger, what do you think?
This is we see this in young entrepreneur a lot. They try to overload the entire presentation with too many asks, and at the end you forgot what they're asking, and it's really hard to say yes to 7 requests. But it's just easier to say. So I advise a startup, and I tell them the only thing you have to do on the first date is to be charming and convincing enough to get a second date. You're not trying to get them to marry you on the first date. Just get a second date, because once you get a second date, you have a different objective. So it's still the same result, but you're trying to sell one thing rather than trying to sell 7 things. And it's really hard for them. They just think by overloading people with information, they will make a choice. And they don't realize decisions have to be engineered into a specific path.
Thank you, Anton, for the feedback about the screen. I may have posted it inadvertently. And also the author discussed the confirmation bias. So when you are suffering from this, the way people process information will be different. If it's one of the beliefs that confirms to my present day world thinking, the question I would be asking is, can I believe this? But if it's a counter belief, the question becomes, must I believe this? Even though the presented information is the truth or reality. So that takes care of the backfire effect and the zone of acceptance or rejection. He also talks about finding the movable middle. And so, Roger, I think this is right up your alley in politics, where you told me before that, there are hardcore members that no matter what amount of persuasion, you will never get them to switch. Can you say a bit more about that?
Sure. In politics and as in business, there are people who believe in A, there are people who believe in B, and there's some people they're not firm in their belief, they're persuadable. What you want to do is understand, people who believe in A and B, they will never change. Stop wasting
A or B. People that believe in A or B.
The movable middle is where persuasion happens, because they're not wedded to an idea. But here's the interesting thing. A, B, and not A or B, they all have confirmation bias. So as an entrepreneur, if you're trying to introduce new change, where do you start? Because everybody's susceptible to confirmation bias. People who are not hardcore A or B believer, how do you get them to change their behavior? That's where all these technique goes in. So you have to understand there are people who's never going to be a customer for reason A or B. People who are not your customer is where we got to apply resource. And this is where business a lot of time is about clear thinking and crisp execution. And the more people I talk to have very little crisp, they don't really think through their problem. A lot of assumption and they don't test it out. And this is why this book really resonated with me, because we don't have a lot of leaders, both politically or business-wise, that are thinking very clearly. And that's one of the things that worries me.
And on the next point, this is something where Julian's expertise and would come into play. The author talks about venture capitalists like Julian, who looks at products and services of startups either as vitamins or painkiller. So let me share the vitamins are those that are nice to have, but painkillers are those products or services that people simply must have. So can you share a bit from your wealth of startup investee companies?
Oh, you mean for my failures? Okay. No, just kidding. So the funny thing is that, it's not the one thing I learned. I mean, I did this, whatever Jonah Berger taught, right, was something that I came into the VC world thinking that it's like that, right? Because it's a very classical thing that they teach at the MBA school. I never attended MBA, but I read enough to actually understand. So, because there's always the thing between a vitamin and a painkiller. But what I've noticed is that that it is different, right? Because when I do, I mean, and again, it's the stage of the VC investments that I do. So I do mostly seed and Series A, pre-Series A kind of investments. So and I realized over time that the deals that are great, right, tend to be painkillers first and then vitamins later. So we typically like to look for very rabid customer bases, right? So it's important to find the painkillers, but it's not so much about the pain. So I like to find painkillers by people who are a bit more fringe, who go into the mainstream. You think about Grab, right? So most people didn't think that it was a problem, right? If you actually asked last time, I know it was difficult, but nobody was really thinking about it as a problem. If you think about Uber was how would you say? Uber was a limousine app, right?
Initially, yes.
Initially. So and this is something because my previous firm did Grab, right, at Series A. So I learned a lot from them, right? And I realized, it's about finding things that are painkillers at the start, but over time you'll become more like a vitamin, nice to have, or it goes into the mainstream. So you can't look for something that is too acute or for everybody. Right, you have to look for something that is painkiller at the beginning for a very fringe group of people. That will turn mainstream. Because if it's mainstream already and it's a painkiller for mainstream, like getting Panadol, we aren't able to find much innovation value out of it. So it has to be a painkiller, but for a very small subset of people.
Okay, great, got it. And so to the next point. The author suggests that we ask less first before we ask for more. So there are actual political campaign studies that came out where they talk about volunteer management. If you ask your volunteers to do one big task, most likely you're going to fail. But if you then break up that task into several series of subtasks and then just ask them to sign up for the first one and then sequentially ask them to sign up for the rest as they finish the first one, you are more likely to get more willingness from the volunteers to help out. I think in other industry segments, they call this the foot in the door technique. And I think somewhere in California, Roger, you'd be more knowledgeable in this one. They applied this technique by asking people first if it was okay to put up a yard sign, a small sign.
No,
And so
the campaign is to reduce speeding in an area. So
yes,
well, they actually went the door-to-door survey asking about people's attitude about, are you for like a reduced speed to save children? Then
okay.
they put up a small sign. Eventually, you have this giant, ugly billboard on your front yard in a very wealthy community. And so, but it's the same thing. Think about all your apps sign up. They just want you first. I lived in a world where we used to have to fill in a 3-page sign up for on the web before I can give them money. Now they just want your email. So business has learned to break this whole complicated process into smaller
chunks.
Yeah, before day, birthday, security number, your favorite pet, blah blah blah, 3 pages before I can even give them money. Now say, oh yeah, leave me your email. Don't just give me your email. Don't even choose a password. We'll send you a request for password later. Just give me your email. No big deal.
Yeah.
So
now,
they have to learn how to make it smaller.
Right. Right. So I need to emphasize this. In the campaign that you mentioned, Roger, they started off with a small sign. And they found out that if a homeowner agreed to a small sign now, 2 weeks later, when you go back to them, they will agree to even larger signs. So this is the classic example of the ask for less first before asking for more.
Yeah. One of the things when we do campaign consulting is we say, okay, ask your volunteer to share your content on social media. Then you move to small amount donation, like maybe 10 Sing dollar, 5 Sing dollar. Then you move to let's meet in person for a discussion. Then you get them passing out a petition and you get them to become an ambassador. This is a 5-month long process. But that's how it works.
So remember in the past Philippine election, we advised one of our favorite candidates to ask for 1 peso. The candidate did not get the point of asking for less before you ask for more, right? So we were saying like people that donate 1 peso, even 1 peso to your campaign are your active supporters. And later on, we can ask them to do more. It's not the money. It's the first step. But, you know, they didn't listen.
Yeah, in pricing strategy, you realize free and $1, there's a world of difference. Getting people to pay free is already hard enough. Get people to pay for $1 is exponentially harder. It's not, you're better off asking for $10 because the act of $1 is a huge ask. And people, young entrepreneurs don't understand that.
Well, now they do after listening to you, right?
Words don't change people. Words don't change people.
So now we now go to the U. We're almost done. Reduce. So this is the U in reduce.
Wait, I just have one point
Anton,
first on the distance thing. I remember when we manage projects, especially the big ones, we cut it out into smaller milestones. And the way we strategize is we make the smaller milestones as a recommendation to the project members, and we are sure that there's a high chance of success. So once you get them to do small things leading towards a big project, it's success by success by success, and you
That's
get
a
better
great example.
buy-in. So it now snowballs into, okay, now we're ready to do this whole change project wherein everyone realizes the big benefit. But it's getting that that carrot that for them to be able to chew on, diba?
Yep, that's a great segue. So now we go to the fourth one, which is uncertainty. The author talks about the uncertainty tax. So in effect, whenever people will not decide when there is uncertainty. So that's the short and long of it, right? So he cites the example of the 5-day vacation survey. Uh, if you pass the exam, will you go out for a 5-day vacation? The answer is yes.
For sure.
If you fail the exam, will you go out and buy the 5-day vacation to console yourself? The answer
not?
is yes. But if you take the exam and you don't know the result, will you go and buy the holiday ticket? Surprisingly, it causes people to pause. Many of them now say, I better wait for the results. But hey, if you think about it, you already know that if you pass, you're going to buy. If you fail, you're still going to buy. So the uncertainty causes people to pause. So let me highlight that. Uncertainty tax causes people to pause making decisions. So how do you solve this problem of uncertainty? In one word, you increase the triability. So he says it's easier to try, more likelier to buy. So Roger, do you have some anecdotes to share along this, or Julian, any anecdotes along the triability among your startup investee companies?
I think the ones that the lesson that I learned from Zopim, because we had free trial, right? Remember?
Right.
So it was a live chat software company. We had a free trial for 2 years, right? And I guess the lesson that we learned was that once we had the free trial, we should have just shortened the number of trials. So we had it at 1 month, right? And then we actually compared the conversion rates of the 1 month trial. Data sample, I think it was about 20,000 users at that time, because we were still early. And then when we went down, I think we went down, in the end, we went down to 2 weeks. So it's not just about trial, it's about having a trial, but making sure that at every stage of the step of the way, you actually ask questions, you try to break things, you try to remove features if possible, to a point whereby you can actually nudge the user to as what Roger said, taking out a credit card is actually a very, 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 very expensive. I learned that the hard way also. So it's important that when you're running a trial, you find the different pain points. This is live, right? So I don't really want to say this, but
live and recorded.
Yeah, scrap it. You have to create certain conditions for your user to want to pay you.
Yeah. So one thing the author adds to harness the freemium model that you've just mentioned is that trials shifts the mindset from comparing your competitor's product to your product into a single evaluation. The moment people agree to try your product, they are shifting the mindset to evaluating your product alone.
Correct.
We did something different with, we sell analysis of political parties, social media power as a early predictor for votes. So when we enter a new country, we contacted one political party. We said, okay, we're new here. We want to provide you with a free sample. So, okay, that's great. So it's free. The word is free. So who are the 3 political parties you most worry about? He gave me the 3 political parties' name. We did the report. We sent it to all 4 parties. And we got 2 points out of that.
Okay.
So it's free to try, but we immediately demonstrate the pain point. They now realize they're transparent. Their collective power is now transparent. So it was way for remove the uncertainty. Does this report work? When they see all four parties' relative power, and we also show historical previous vote, they realize it's not just about them, it's about the marketplace. So we were able to reduce the uncertainty both about what we do and the marketplace simultaneously.
Okay. So I wanted to share with our listeners what Acura Cars did to promote their cars. So apparently, people that already knew about Acura were loyal fans of Acura. Their problem was discoverability. Not a lot of people knew about their brand. So what they did was they partnered with the hotel, and they gave the hotel, what do you call this? The hotel guest the access to their cars to use to take them anywhere in the city. So they tied up with the hotel, and it went well for them. Thousands of people bought Acura.
One of the things in the United States, there's a group called the Gideon Group. They are a Christian evangelical group. They are the one who put all these free Bible in motels and hotels. They're called the Gideon Bible. It's just the Bible. And so that's one way for them to take advantage of that. People are alone in the hotel. They're probably emotionally vulnerable. And there's and they do this for a long time now. I'm just surprised that no other religious group has done it.
Okay. So going back to the issue of uncertainty, the author, Jonah Berger, suggests that one way is to make the transaction reversible. So he cites the example of the Philadelphia's Street Tales Animal Rescue, where you can adopt an animal and try it out for a 2-week period. If it doesn't work out, you can return the pet. So that resulted in increased adoption. The other example, and the more common one among startups, is what's your return policy? So he argues that by having more lenient product return policy actually increase the profit of the companies offering them. We do know that the e-commerce world, there are people that abuse that policy. But he argues that overall, the net effect from the loss is offset by good or better word of mouth.
That was the entire uniqueness of Zoho, the shoe company that sold to Amazon. They have free return policy.
No. I think it's Zappos.
Tony's here.
Yeah.
But they basically build the return into the price. It's not free. It's just not visible.
I think it depends because so the funny thing is I actually spent a lot of time looking at Tony's stuff. Because he was doing that whole like customer happiness journey, right?
Yeah.
And I even went on a bus trip with him actually, weirdly. But the thing is that it's not just about a return policy, right? Making it easy. I think it's not a binary answer. It's actually quite a bigger answer in the sense that you need to make the whole process very, very customer centric, right? Like Tony's guys don't just like give free returns to just make it easy. They actually go above and beyond customer service. Like every customer agent is given like after your training for the first 3 weeks, he actually does this weird thing. He will offer you 2 or 3 months salary if you quit at the spot. After 1 month.
And surprisingly, very few people take.
Correct. But the ones who stay are the ones who really love the company and love the service. So he and this is only for the customer service guys, right? And like they will even do things like buy you flowers if they realize that your spouse have passed away. The thing. It's no. It's really very extreme, right? So and that's why they have such a huge profit margins in even though they yeah, because
shoes.
because it's not just one aspect of the free returns. It's a whole total experience that you have to give to the customer in order to have the kind of margins. That's what I'm trying to say. Having easy customer returns is great, but it's not enough. You need to really get the customer to actually believe in your product and service.
Well, a lot of things has to be right as well. So that's what you're saying.
Apple doesn't make their own product.
Yeah, they buy it elsewhere.
Yeah, for them it's really just their brand. It's a really amazing concept.
And that's why they were bought out by Amazon.com. Right. So corroborating evidence. So here, basically, if I were to sum it up, you have to realize that people's attitude could be weak or strong, or their belief system. Sometimes, if the belief system towards a particular item or issue is weak, you can use the sprinkler approach. However, if their belief really is very strong, either you give up or you use the fire hose approach. So sprinkler or fire hose, you need to apply the proper strategy depending on how strongly held a particular belief that you're trying to change. Does that make sense, Julian?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes and no, I guess, because like, if you think about behavior, right? Because when I look at behavior, I always think it from a biochemistry standpoint.
Okay, interesting. Go ahead. Tell me more.
No, because I mean, before Zopim, I spent a lot of years in biotech, right? So at least I know a little bit about neurobiology. So the thing about, if you think about how patterns are formed, right, or how it depends on what kind of patterns, right? If you're talking about addiction patterns, it usually is a biochemical process, right? It's like your this thing called the prefrontal cortex is for fear, and then it's also linked to your dopamine receptors, which is for pleasure, right? So you need to repetitively present something to them to actually change the behavior, in a short term. So like for example, which is why I do it for my gaming companies sometimes. I tell them that we have to learn from the slot machines, right? Like how you give a reward. When you give a reward, it's not just a sound. It's not just like when you do slot machines, when you run the slot machines, there's always that sound that goes in the background. But that sound is actually very, very clearly designed to link rewards to your cash out. And it's like, but then you're looking forward to that extra sound, right? So it's there is actually where people who are on slot machines are actually being gamed into it. That's why they form an addictive behavior into it, right? So because of the dopamine hit, right, when you win, but any associate to it, it's Pavlov's theory, right? So when I think about changing of behaviors and providing evidence, I don't think evidence is enough. It's really through repetitive behavior, and you have to allow the subject to associate his or her experience with something unique in your product or your service that they can identify with, and it gives them that that pleasure that they get. It's just like Trump's America, right? You think about make America.
Careful! We are on live. We don't want the CIA or the FBI going down on us.
No, I'm not. I'm saying something that is why it makes it why it's so powerfully associated with the old and the elderly in the US is because they call for a time when they were younger. when they were happier, when they were looking forward to certain things. That's why they said "Make America Great Again." But if you think about that whole notion of that political message, is to get them to remember when things were
Better
great.
for them.
Yeah, and for them, when they look at the memories, they always look at it from tinted shoulders. From a data standpoint, it's a horrible. The history has allowed them to increase their life expectancies, increase their like basically every single stat that they have increased, but they always look back, with tinted glasses, and that message was gives them an association. And when you think about the past, you have good memories, right?
Yes.
They remember when the US was revered. They remember, so like it gives. So that's how he was able to so powerfully control and create that emotional message to them. Because there's also a biochemical, because we must remember that there is a biochemical process that goes on when we think about stuff. Whether is it through a religious, epiphany, right? When you're in church, when you feel like you're in touch with God, there is a certain, whether it's spiritual or not, there is still a certain amount of biological need that goes at the back. So we have to be mindful of that when we are trying to design a process to actually anchor a behavior.
There's a book for that. It's called Hook. There's actual book for that. I believe, Anton, you were raising your hands. Was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just something that I've observed and remembered while reading that portion on corroborating evidence. In the Philippines, especially during now it's COVID, some companies have diverted their marketing funds from traditional media, newspaper, TV, radio, into marketing via influencers. So now, and they target a particular target market in terms of age, socioeconomic preference, wherein these people
True.
would follow certain influencers. And if there's a commonality in what those influencers are promoting, then their barriers to change their mind or to adopt something new gets lessened. Those roadblocks are taken away, and now they're more susceptible to change, to try it out for the first time. So having these types of corroborating evidence
Evidence.
helps these people now make this decision to change.
Okay. I think
And paying the influencers in marketing, they're not cheap, but certainly they're not as expensive as your traditional media.
and I
They're
think we're
becoming more expensive because ABS-CBN has been taken off the market for advertising.
Okay. I think we're about to run out of time. And Roger, you did mention like the book inspired you
Yes.
to do some public service work.
We always do
Freemium.
we always do public service.
Go ahead.
I think this book is really important because it addressed the problem that we are not really good at persuading people anymore. We're really bad at changing people's behavior. So I'm trying to form a small consulting group of people who have read the book and who are just interested in changing behavior. We want to form a consulting consortium to help local government and NGO to help plan out their communication strategy for a campaign. So it's going to be an open group on Facebook. We will meet maybe twice a month to discuss the project, and it's going to be very project based. So we are going to accept 2 or 3 communication projects a year from NGO or local government to help them plan out the communication process to really create people who are good at communication and change, because we need this resource. And we just can't depend on glib PR agency with a splashy campaign that doesn't change anything. We need real change. So Wilson and I were going to form this group that anybody can join, but you got to participate, you got to contribute. And this is
Great idea. Yeah. Last words, Anton and Julian and Sir Ramon Duremdes.
Yeah, for me, the book is an easy read. As you told me last time, it's about 5 hours to read. But what
Yeah,
I liked
short
about it
books.
was that it felt like I was back in MBA because it gave case studies, live case studies, and at the end there's a summary. It's very clear, so I enjoyed reading it.
Yeah, me too. Julian, any last words
I,
for
I
our
didn't read
audience?
I didn't read the book, but I wish I had. So I can say.
So are you saying that after discussing the book, you are now more inclined to go out and borrow the book from the National Library like I did?
Uh, no, I think I'll
No.
buy it. I think I'll just buy it. I don't have time. Time
Yeah.
is the one thing I don't have. So it's like,
Yeah. So again, thank you guys for spending your mornings with me and discussing the book. I hope we also have shared a lot with our listeners today. Thank you guys. Bye
thank
bye.
you. Take care.
Bye. Thank you. Till next time.
See you,
Yep.
man.
Bye.